So anyways, there is this video I wanted to check out by Wired very quickly. And as I say, it's just an 8-minute video. And oh my gosh, calm down. Goodness gracious. But it's about real-time translation, which used to be my job. So let's have a look at this one very quickly. And then we move, ladies and gentlemen, into pineapple on pizza. And I'll do it just for you. Will I survive it, or will that be the end of the Metatron? We'll see. All right, let's see if I recognize and remember any of these techniques that I mentioned here, since I used to do this. Let's go.
Are about to begin a negotiation. This one is from an unspecified Spanish-speaking country.
Hola.
And this one is from an unspecified English-speaking country.
Hello.
And these are real interpreters. And I'm Barry Slaughter Olsen, a conference interpreter with 25 years of experience interpreting for diplomats and world leaders at places like the UN.
Wow. Man, this is going to be good. I love this kind of stuff. All right, teach us the secret sauce. Let's see if I know some of the techniques, because, I mean, I'm allergic to nonsense. Metatron 2025, absolutely, my friend. And pineapple on pizza is nonsense. Let's go.
When you think of interpreters, scenes like these are probably the first that come to mind. People in soundproof booths, interpreting in real time to government.
Been there, done it.
Officials below. But interpreters often have to do their jobs in private, closed-door meetings. This is called bilateral interpreting.
Right.
And as anyone who heard about the Trump-Putin meetings knows, it's a very real situation when certain meetings just have a limited number of people.
How tall is Trump?
People in a room. And those people are sworn to secrecy. This is a demonstration of what can typically happen in these meetings behind closed doors.
All right, let's go.
Comenzamos.
Shall we begin?
Actually, things began before anyone even arrived.
Right.
Most of the time, terms are agreed upon in advance of the meeting. The agendas are carefully negotiated and outlined.
That is true. When I was, obviously all of this is true. This is a professional, but I'm just saying, I do remember that when I was doing the simultaneous translation, which by the way, it used to be what I wanted to do as a job, and I did it for a few years, and then I stopped because it was stressful. I was really good at it. Like they gave me a nickname, the machine gun. It was my nickname. I did it with English, Italian, and Japanese. It was very demanding. But I remember getting these. And you know what, another thing that I remember about this job? That sometimes you would get this, and the speakers would literally follow it letter by letter, like they must have memorized it. Those were the easiest days. However, there were situations in which we got this, and the speaker, it started a little bit, and then it went completely rogue, and you had to improvise it. I had a colleague panic because of one of those. I had to deal with those, but I usually did a good job. It wasn't a big problem, but that's why it's a very specific kind of training. I might actually make a video about it at one point, like the techniques that. But let's see if he's using one of those, as if he's explaining these. It's interesting. Let's go.
They can range from arms reduction to economic cooperation to water rights. All we need is a plausible topic to get started. Let's say dolphin-safe tuna fishing.
Totally.
To start, our interpreters position themselves. You'd think they'd be in the middle somewhere because they've got to hear well, right?
No.
Well, for meetings in front of the press, they don't want to be the center of attention or appear in press photos.
Yeah.
See how they're on the sidelines here?
Yeah, I actually like this already. I like that he's going into the details. Yeah, I remember that, being told stuff like this, like move there, sit there. It was all structured. Thank you very much, Daniel. That was the Machinatron. That could be the new one, yeah.
That's so they can easily be cropped out of the pictures to be published later, which doesn't always work out.
So that's where I would sit down when there wasn't any press involved. I've done this a lot. You sit down here, you speak very quietly behind the person. I've done this like hundreds of times.
So before this meeting begins, there are things that need to be decided. Will recordings be permitted? Is a record being kept? Who's going to attend? But this is a closed-door bilateral meeting, so it'll just be these four.
Okay.
Now, there are two styles of interpretation, simultaneous and consecutive. Consecutive is the most common style of interpreting in diplomatic situations. Here's an example.
It's been a while since I've been here. I'm so excited to be back. Thank you for having me.
And then?
Desde hace bastante tiempo que no venía, así que muchísimas gracias por recibirme nuevamente.
And this is the easiest one. This is the one this one doesn't stress me, by the way. So the other person stops. She says something, I translate it into Japanese, imagine. Then he starts speaking, he translated. This is the easiest one. The only times when this gets annoying is when you are in a position where this is big shot boss and he doesn't stop. That's the only situation in which I got annoyed. But sometimes maybe because I'm Italian, I would just tell them. I'm like, excuse me, I need to translate. I've done that. I would do it, even if I did for a big... Maybe that's why I'm not having that career anymore. But I mean, isn't that more important, the accuracy of the translation rather than the person's ego? Like, you got to stop and let the translator speak. But when they do that, piece of cake. If you know the language, this is easy.
Interpreter waits until the speaker pauses.
Estamos muy agradecidos de poder colaborar nuevamente con el gobierno de su país.
And then interprets.
We're very happy to be able to collaborate again with the government of your country.
Simple, right? But what happens if the speaker goes on and on without pausing?
Estamos muy agradecidos de poder volver a colaborar con ustedes.
Interpreters rarely translate word for word. Instead,
I did. I always did. Word for freaking word.
We remember specific ideas and translate those ideas accordingly. But when the speaker goes on and on for a long time, interpreters rely on
notes. Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
We want to authorize the use of the
It's insane. No two translators have the same techniques, by the way. There is a general idea of how you do this when you train for this. But then I remember my colleagues, we all had our own, like, there's no way that my colleague could read whatever the heck I write down, because you have your own symbols. Yeah, this is, oh my gosh, this is nostalgic. We're talking 20 years ago for me.
Friendly label by your country's tuna processors.
These symbols represent the speaker's ideas.
Don't mess with the tuna.
Authorized equipment and fishing practices.
But each interpreter has their own style. Watch as 3 different interpreters take notes on the same sentence.
We want to authorize the use of the dolphin-friendly label by your country's tuna processors, but we must have a reliable way to verify the use of authorized equipment and fishing practices.
What I would have done instead of writing tuna, what I would have done in this scenario is T inside a circle means tuna, because that's much faster to write. Basically, that's the idea. That's what's happening here. Of course, you can use acronyms that you have memorized as you're preparing for this. But yeah, that's the idea.
Interpreters usually come up with the symbols beforehand. And as you can see here, on Caddy's cheat sheet, she carefully thought about what will be most useful for this particular meeting. The DFL stands for Dolphin Friendly Label. The TU in a box refers to tuna that's being caught.
Right.
You get the idea. Yeah. Now let's watch as Caddy interprets her own notes into Spanish.
Queremos autorizar el uso de la etiqueta de Dolphin Friendly para los procesadores de pescado de su país.
Muy bien. Gracias. Sí.
Pero necesitamos poder verificar que estén utilizando equipos y técnicas de pesca adecuadas.
Esta es una cosa muy interesante. Me gusta el idioma. You Muppets.
Now let's switch to simultaneous interpretation. Simultaneous interpretation is usually used with...
Okay, before he goes into the simultaneous, which was a nightmare, I still did it, but it was a nightmare psychologically. There is a good question here. In what language did you take notes? In the target language. So if I'm supposed to speak everything into Italian, so I'm listening to English or Japanese and I'm translating into Italian, my notes are in Italian because I want it to be as quick of a process as possible. But if I'm being asked, which often happened to me, it shouldn't, because in theory you should always be asked to translate from your native tongue professionally from a second language into native. Because you're faster that way and you're more precise because you're getting out your native language. But you know how many times clients don't care about that and they're like, no, tell him this in Japanese. I did it because I was kind of a jack of all trades in the sense that, yeah, they could select which language you want. Like literally could go bling, bling, ding. That was me. So I've done it. But then in that case, if I know, as I've done multiple times, that I'm going to have to speak Japanese, then my notes are going to be in Japanese accordingly. Yeah.
With earpieces and microphones, and with interpreters working from a soundproof booth. But we won't have equipment in this demonstration. When we're right next to another person, like in this scenario, we can employ what we call chuchotage, which means whispering in French.
Considerar otro tipo de medidas para que nos...
This usually isn't ideal. Whispering for a long time is bad for the vocal cords. It can also be hard to hear due to ambient noise in the room, like ventilation.
For kids.
Now let's
This is a really well-made video, I have to say. I did that in church a lot. I used to translate in church for guests like that a lot. Church is usually pretty quiet, though. And when there are choirs, it doesn't matter because it's not like I'm translating the words. So, yeah, that was not bad. Let me see. Tell me you are already dead in Japanese. お前はもう死んでいる. Or お前はすでに死んでいる. Two ways. And let's see, ¿alguna vez tradujiste español? No, because I couldn't do it professionally. The only languages that I could do professionally would be, I mean, if it's something simple, I could do it in between Italian and Spanish, but I've never done it professionally. Professional, I've only done English and Japanese. So yeah.
Talk about pacing. In simultaneous interpretation, you try to maintain an optimal distance from the original speaker. This is referred to as décalage, or ear-voice span.
Without spitting on him.
We'll call it EVS. So when one diplomat starts speaking, the person employing chuchotage would probably start here.
We understand perfectly the preferences of the consumers in your country, and that is why we are coming together to identify...
Even if the speaker is speaking at 100 to 110 words per minute, which research tells us is the optimal speed for interpreting, the interpreter still has to figure out the optimal EVS. Here's the problem. The further back in the diplomat's speech the interpreter is,
de los consumidores de su país, y por eso también queremos reunirnos con ustedes para encontrar una solución que sea aceptable.
the more the interpreter has to keep in their short-term memory. They're listening and processing as they're interpreting.
Yeah, so this, what she's just showing here, would be someone that I'm like, no, not professional. So the way I prepared for this, when I did simultaneous translation, here's what I did. I would put on a CD, a recording, whatever. I put on a dialogue during a movie where they're speaking, imagine that they're speaking English, right? And then I would play it and practice speaking over it, because what you do is that you want to develop the ability to keep listening while you speak, which you absolutely do, but it takes months of practice. So I've done that daily for hours when I was training for this, and I did it with Japanese as well. So I would listen to Japanese and then I would speak simultaneously while the speaker still speaks, and still you are able to retrieve the information. Of course, you could get confused if you don't remember a word, but usually what you're supposed to do in that case is not pause and find an alternative. So practicing your thesaurus is excellent. If you don't remember the exact word, you can find something else that still gets the point across.
It's a lot.
Is high-quality dolphin.
High-quality dolphin, yeah.
But get too close to the original speaker's words, and they may screw up things like grammar, syntax, and style.
The preferences of we understand that the preferences of the country of yours, that is...
And of course, interpreters are prone to fatigue and burnout. Fatigue will hit at around 30 minutes of straight interpreting. This is why simultaneous interpreters often switch out in intervals of 30 minutes or less.
Yeah.
If pushed to our limits, interpreters can really suffer.
That's why I said, like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I was good at it. I wasn't like the best, but I was good at it. But I am like, simultaneous is too much. And when it comes, like, I wouldn't want to do it for 20 years or 30 years, like a career. And then I preferred, then I moved into the consequential one where, okay, he speaks, then I translate, I have my time to do it, and I take notes much better. But after that, I went into teaching. I got this teaching job back in the day. And I'm like, you know what? Teaching is just, it's so much easier. So I did that. And then my YouTube channel began, and you appeared, and the rest is history.
Recall the 2009 incident in which Muammar Gaddafi's interpreter collapsed at the UN after simultaneously interpreting for over 75 minutes. So what happens if the conversation turns emotional or the speaker becomes rude?
Well, my friend, I've listened to what you have to say, and the only conclusion I can come up with is that you're a damn fool.
Interpreters are not meant to be mediators. Our only job is to stay true to the message of the speaker. If someone becomes rude or angry,
you have to translate
if threats are made, then we are supposed to interpret those threats.
Threats, like I'll off your entire family. You got to translate that. Imagine having to do this for Joe Biden. Yeah, he would say, he uses the, I noticed he used the expression, the idea. He says that a lot. He loves that expression, doesn't he? With Trump instead, what I noticed that he has this, I mentioned this already in a video, but he has this intonation that I think is rehearsed. I do believe that Trump has this rehearsed intonation when he goes, he's a wonderful person, and he's really good. He's one of the best, his lovely, best father in the world. He has this intonation. And I think it's something that he practiced, and it's in connection with psychological, not manipulation necessarily, but it's like something to make your speech more, oh gosh, what's the word? It's like that people don't get bored. Yeah, it's not the only one that does it. It places emphasis into specific words that they want you to hear. And it also makes it so that you're always waiting for a conclusion. You're always waiting for a conclusion because naturally, depending on the accent, there are some accents that have a rising terminal. But naturally, whenever you reach the conclusion of a point, your voice goes down, like I just did now. He doesn't much. And I believe that is to put the person into a psychological box in which you're always waiting for the conclusion to appear, but it never arrives. And so you're constantly focused. I really believe that that's intentional.
Faithfully. So in this situation, an interpreter would not say,
Y la única conclusión a la cual puedo llegar es que usted ha sido un poquitito imprudente.
and here is an example of a faithful interpretation.
Y la única conclusión a la cual puedo llegar es que usted es un perfecto idiota.
Although a speaker may become emotional and gesticulate, the interpreter is not going to parrot the behavior of the speaker. This is not the way.
That would be so unprofessional. Like, could you imagine? Okay, stai facendo? Ammazzo sta famiglia. Could you imagine? The translator.
Pero ¿cómo me puedes hacer esto a mí? Yo pensé que éramos amigos.
How could you do this to me? I thought we were friends.
Yeah,
This
look. Oh, that looks so unprofessional.
is more realistic.
Pero ¿cómo me puedes hacer esto a mí? Yo pensé que éramos amigos.
But how could you do this to me? I thought we were friends.
So
He's just the voice. He is just the voice. Exactly.
the situation has gotten quite intense. Maybe a joke would be helpful to lighten the mood. But jokes are some of the most difficult things to interpret
Very
because
true.
they can get lost in translation easily.
What did one dolphin say to the other after splashing him? You did that on purpose.
Never mind that this joke barely makes sense in English. In Spanish, it completely doesn't work because porpoise is marsopa and purpose is propósito.
¿Qué le
Doesn't
dijo
work.
un delfín al otro después de salpicarlo? Usted eso lo hizo encima de la marsopa.
Untranslatable pun.
No entiendo.
Attempts at humor are often lost, and there's not much an interpreter can do. There's an anecdote.
Es imposible. Sometimes it works. Other times, as he says, they're impossible. At that point, I would translate word by word and add a slight comment, but you're not supposed to. So it depends on the formality. If it's informal, I would just say, it's a joke. It just makes sense in English. And then usually if you do that, the other person will laugh, particularly if they're Japanese. Then they'll be like, they'll do that out of politeness. So it works. In a extra form, I've never worked for the freaking NASA here, whatever this is, UN. So no, probably you couldn't do it. Although it would be good if you could, because it would really help. But it is what it is.
About an interpreter who, when faced with an untranslatable joke, simply said,
Oiga, su colega acaba de contar un chiste que resulta totalmente intraducible. Así que ríase, por favor.
Eso estuvo bueno.
Muy bueno.
That was a good one. That was a good one.
Of course,
I love
what
Spanish.
we've seen today is a tiny excerpt of what are often longer
video.
and arduous negotiations. And that concludes our bilateral meeting behind
Very
closed
nice.
doors. This job is tough to juggle the many things that we have to do to be able to interpret well and accurately.
Yeah.
But this job is important because it's what makes communication possible between countries and between
And I
people.
just noticed, why do I have the subtitles in Mandarin of all things? Well, whatever.
I've been at it for
Yeah, good
25
video.
years, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Hey, I'm glad that he loves it. I guess I didn't when I was doing this. So, I mean, I did. Sometimes I did. I just didn't want to make it into continue it into a career.